So I'm going to start off with what is a cochlear implant. A cochlear implant is a surgically implanted electronic device that can restore hearing to people with severe to profound hearing loss. There are two parts, an external part that sits outside of the ear, and then an internal part where the surgeon implants underneath the skin behind the ear. The external device has an ear hook, a speech processor, and a battery, and that allows the external processor to sit on the ear. It also has a microphone that picks up sound from that side of the head and then transmits it to the speech processor that processes the sound and sends it to the transmitter coil. And when the magnet of the external device lines up with the magnet of the internal device, a signal can be transmitted to the internal device to the receiving antenna. That signal is then sent to the receiver stimulus that converts the signal into a series of electrical impulses that travel down the cochlear implant wire to the electrode array, which has a series of metal contacts that delivers the electricity to the auditory nerve and allows us to hear. So who is it for? Well, sound normally enters into the ear canal, hits the eardrum, and the eardrum vibrates. And once the eardrum vibrates, the three bones behind it vibrate and sends a signal into the cochlea and stimulates the auditory hair cells to deliver an electrical signal that is transmitted through the cochlear nerve to the brain so that way we can hear. But sometimes our auditory hair cells are not functioning well, and the signal that is sent from the cochlea is not as strong. And when that happens, patients can't hear as well, and that's called sensory neural hearing loss. So what you see here in this slide is a plot of an audiogram where we put the results of a conventional hearing test. From left to right, we plot low pitches to high pitches or frequencies, and from up to down, we plot good hearing to poor hearing. And a traditional cochlear implant candidate has moderate to profound sensory neural hearing loss, as you can see toward the bottom of the plot in green. And when this type of hearing loss starts to affect our ability to understand speech, a hearing aid may not work as well to restore hearing. Sometimes the hearing gets poor enough that our ability to understand speech declines significantly and declines to a point where it's less than 50% on the implanted side or the worst ear. It can also decline in the other ear to a point where a patient may only be understanding up to 60% of the words going into that ear, or 60% in both ears. And when that happens, patients with hearing loss are a candidate for cochlear implants. Who else is it for? People with single-sided deafness are also candidates for cochlear implants as well. What is single-sided deafness? In a person with single-sided deafness, they have really profound hearing loss on one side. But on the other side, they have relatively normal or maybe just a little bit of mild hearing loss. And in a quiet environment, face-to-face, when you talk to them, they're actually doing very well, understanding 100% of the things that are being said to them because they have really one good ear. But as soon as multiple people are talking, as soon as they step back into an area where there's a lot of background noise, they decompensate because they can't localize sound or understand speech and noise. And so if we can restore their hearing in their bad ear, we can really give them a lot of good quality of life and speech understanding in more difficult situations. People with asymmetric hearing loss can also benefit from cochlear implants too. They are very similar to single-sided deafness patients in that they have really profound hearing loss on one side. And the other side, they have maybe a little bit worse of a hearing loss, and that usually ranges from mild to moderate severe hearing loss. And if I put a hearing aid on their better ear, same thing. They can hear me very well in a quiet environment. But as soon as there are multiple people talking to them, as soon as there's noise in the environment, they decompensate and they can't hear very well. So providing them a cochlear implant may really help them in their day-to-day lives. So who else is a candidate for cochlear implants? Hybrid cochlear implant candidates are a very special group because they have really good hearing in the low frequencies, but they have really poor hearing in the mid to high frequencies. And generally, patients that have this profile of hearing loss generally have the same profile in both ears. But this type of hearing loss can, over time, affect a person's ability to understand words and speech. And when it starts doing that, patients may be a candidate for what we call a hybrid cochlear implant system. So we've talked about kind of like the three big categories of patients that are candidates for cochlear implants. So what does that process entail? So you'll visit your ENT doctor. Your ENT doctor will assess you, order appropriate hearing tests, imaging, laboratory tests. You'll then go to see your audiologist who will perform the hearing tests and fit you with appropriate hearing aids if you haven't gotten them already. And after you get all of your tests done, your ENT doctor will then review those results with you and determine whether your ear can be surgically implanted with the cochlear implant. And if it is, then you'll see your audiologist again, who will perform additional hearing tests to determine if you are a cochlear implant candidate. And if you are, then your ENT physician will then discuss the details of the surgery with you, and with the help of your team, you will decide which implant company to go with. Currently, there are 3 companies in the United States that you can choose from. In the future, there may be more. But when you decide you want to do a cochlear implant, your ENT physician will bring you to the operating room and perform the cochlear implant surgery, which takes about 1 to 2 hours on average. You'll wake up with a big head dressing on just to cover the ear that was implanted, and you go home the same day. Then in a few days, you'll come back to your ENT physician to ensure that the ear is healed before your audiologist activates the cochlear implant. At most institutions, we activate the implant around 2 to 4 weeks after the surgery. And then you're going to be working with your audiologist and your audioverbal therapist to gain speech understanding with your implant.
Mi sobrina que tiene 17 años, mi pérdida auditiva comenzó desde que ella nació. Entonces ella se aprendió de una manera natural a hablarme a mí de una forma que era la única persona que yo le escuchaba todo el tiempo. hace poco estaba realizando su essay, un trabajo que hizo para la universidad, para entrar a la universidad, y una de las frases que puso que me llegó a mi corazón fue: tengo mejor comunicación con mi tía sorda que con todo el mundo con quien estoy rodeado que escucha perfecto. Sino es una persona que tiene una conciencia total y absoluta de cómo hablarle a alguien para que entienda cuando no tiene audición. Pero es algo que a ella le ha salido de una manera natural. Te ponen el implante, tú vas a identificar sonidos que no sabes qué son. Entonces ella me decía, eso es un avión, eso es un camión, y ella me ayudaba a identificar los sonidos para yo aprender otra vez esa nueva forma de escuchar. Como ejemplo de que nuestro cerebro es como un disco duro. En ese disco duro están todas las voces de las personas que yo escuchaba durante mi vida en que podía escuchar bien. En el momento en que eres implantada y te activan, es como que tu cerebro, al escuchar a esa persona que había escuchado en el pasado, ¿verdad?, inmediatamente hacía la conexión y decía, esta es la voz de María, esta es la voz de Pedro, y me la ponía muy parecido a como yo la escuchaba antes. Nunca es como antes, pero es muy parecido. El segundo implante, que lo hice hace 1 año y medio, mejoró muchísimo la situación de entender voces desconocidas. La razón por la que decidí hacer un documental, hay mucha información en lo audiovisual acerca del cáncer, acerca de otras situaciones que toca vivir en la vida, pero de la pérdida auditiva no hay, y es necesario tenerla.